Hello there, what is going on, everyone? Today we are talking about full-scale war for Star Wars Legion. I was able to get a playtest, a demonstration of full-scale war at Adepticon, and while it went very well, there were some things I wasn't expecting. For example, I was not able to film or photograph the actual gameplay, specifically the new components that are being used in full-scale war. So without being able to film or record or even take notes during the match, there was definitely certain restrictions that we were asked not to do. So a lot of this is coming from memory or notes that were taken after the game, but I do want to break down several key aspects of what full-scale war was. For example, I want to talk about 4 key areas: what was the same, what was different, how it felt, and lastly, some things that I would like to see changed. Now, we were also given an opportunity to share our feedback with an AMG developer while we were there, and it was actually a fantastic demo. And so I think it was done very well. I do have some criticisms. I do have some things that were really fun about it. There's definitely some pros and cons to it, but hopefully I can answer some of your questions, and I'm going to talk about my experience playing full-scale war. If you like what you see here, I'd love for you to stick around and subscribe. We're definitely going to be covering more of full-scale war because, spoilers, overall, it is fun. This is going to be a retail product, and I definitely will plan to pick up a copy, and definitely looking forward to seeing how it evolves and develops as time goes on, because what I have played won't necessarily be the exact same experience that you play when it hits its next iteration or when it becomes a retail product. So keep that in mind. Also, keep in mind that what I'm going to tell you is largely based on the memories and the afterthoughts of the game. So it is possible I may have some details slightly incorrect as they were. Like if you were somebody that was playing against me, or if you were somebody who was also there and did a demo, you might remember things slightly differently. So I'll try to talk in some vague generalities on certain points that I'm a little fuzzy on. But for the most part, what I'm going to tell you was accurate as to the time that we played it. Now, considering this is also a very early game, and it's very early format, very much an alpha, a lot of things are subject to change. Some things that were even being changed, I think, during the con. I think if you were like the first person to play and if you were the last person to play, you might have seen changes that changed in between that because they were trying some different things. But for the most part, it didn't change that much. But I do think there was a change when it came to like suppression a little bit, and we'll talk about that. So, but what I can tell you is that I did take a few photos, and so we'll talk about that a little bit. Also, we do have some new sponsors. I'll talk about those a little bit more at the end of the video, but you can see the codes that are scrolling above me if you're interested in checking out any of them. But I'll talk a little bit more towards the end of the video. So, very cool stuff. So, what is full-scale war? So if you guys hadn't already seen, full-scale war is a 2,000 point format where you are taking a very high-level approach to the game. Think of it as your sort of Grand Admiral Thrawn in space commanding a battle on the ground. You're not a ground commander, you're more of a higher-level commander. And with that regard, you're activating divisions instead of individual units. Now, the divisions are, we've talked about them before. There's different types of divisions, and even since it was first announced, there were more divisions and updated division cards added. And that actually was an interesting thing for me because I went to Adepticon with the version 1 versions of the division cards, and there were actually new division cards that were added after the fact, and then division cards that I had were changed a little bit. So some of the divisions now get bonuses when they get orders. There's different types of divisions, like a speeder division and things like that. But for the most part, divisions are grouped into command, heavy, infantry divisions, and specialist divisions, and a few variations thereabouts. And while they typically are what they sound like a heavy division is pretty much heavies, and an infantry division is pretty much infantry, there are options to take like one extra support type unit or one extra heavy or something like that in an infantry unit. So they have a little bit of diversity, but for the most part, the units that go into a division have to be built the same. So if you're bringing a bunch of stormtroopers and you bring a rocket launcher, all the stormtroopers in that division have to have the rocket launcher. The only exception to that is if you have unique upgrades. So if you take a named character as your heavy and one, they don't have to be the same. I think that's a smart choice because there's a lot going on. So what is the same in full-scale war? Well, to answer some of your questions, it still plays on a 6x3. It's still using the same type of battlefield. Not a 6x4, not a 4x8 or anything like that. Still a 6x3. It's still using about the same terrain profile. The boards we were using are basically indistinguishable from any of the tournament boards, as you can see. And I have a few photos. Now, these photos was taken with permission. We were able to make sure that the cards and any kind of materials weren't in the photos. Or they were turned down to where they're not readable. Because again, this had to do with some of the cards and the text on these was very early and they weren't all ready for public display. So that was the idea with that. So while we were able to do it, they didn't want these being kind of broadcast out to the world. So I was happy to oblige. But yeah, you're still using the same terrain. You're still deploying from off the board edge, much like you do in the current version of Star Wars Legion. You still kind of start off the board, activate a division instead of a unit, but you still kind of then, your first action is to deploy. There are still also objectives. While the objective cards and the battle cards are completely different, you're not going to use your regular battle cards. You are still using objectives. And units still contest objectives. Units still exist. They're still within divisions, but unit leaders still contest those objectives in the same way that they would in a normal game. So just because you have a division near an objective, you still have to measure the individual units within that division to see who contests an objective, and you're still scoring points. Now, onto what is different. There's a lot of things that are different. For example, scoring points is not just a point total that ends the game. You will actually play until you run out of time, like we did run out of time. But that was, again, this one, if it goes to be a tournament format, time will be a concern. But it's only 4 rounds. There's one less round to play. So at the end of the rounds, then you'll add up however many points are there. And that's how that goes. So you're not playing till 12 points because you can score a lot. There is a lot of interesting ways to score. There are divisions. Again, I talked about this already. This is one of the things that's different. We're talking about differences now. Divisions, they get orders and then they activate as a division. When you activate a division, every unit within that division activates one at a time. And so you will then activate the whole division, which means you might activate 3 ATSTs in a row. There was someone that brought 10 ATSTs. I didn't do that, but it was definitely the talk of the event. But yes, I brought 3 ATSTs and a couple of other heavies as well. So I did a little bit of that, but I tried a wider variety. I had tried to have a balanced Imperial list. I'm pleased to say this was grouped by, we had 4 people at a time. So I played a Rebel player, and then to my right there was a Clone Wars table where a Republic player was playing a Separatist player. So we had everything represented except, of course, for Shadow Collective, but we did have the 4 main factions represented at the time, which I thought was very cool. We didn't plan that. It just happened to work out that way, which was very fun. So these divisions, they have some other special rules too. For example, suppression goes on the division. All tokens go on the division, but if it's an aim token or basically a green token, when if the division gets a name, everybody gets a name in the division. If the division gets a dodge, everybody gets a dodge. I believe the same holds true for standby, but we didn't use standby. I think standby may have had another change that made it even less good. But it didn't come up in our game, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, plus it may get changed again. But we did have some remarks about how standby is becoming less and less good every time it's changed. So there was a slight nerf to how standby works in this game, but I'm not going to go into it too much more because I don't remember the specifics and I don't want to say the wrong thing. Now, divisions also have a coherency. Their coherency is range 2, which is still a pretty big bubble, but if you get outside of that range 2, then bad things will happen. You'll start to take massive amounts of suppression. Divisions have a kind of a high suppression threshold. Yeah, a lot of them it's 5. Some of them I think it's 3, but a lot of them it's 5. And so that's pretty good. So you're less likely to be suppressed, even less likely to be panicked, but considering that you can take multiple shots when your opponent activates a division and then shoots you, it is actually likely to still get suppressed and or panicked. So even though you got higher threshold numbers, the way that it works when you're activating so many units at a time, it's definitely possible to do that. There's another interesting thing that was talked about, is that if you split fire and you're firing into a division, let's say, for example, it's a stormtrooper division, and I see 2 different units of stormtroopers that are right there, and I'm going to split fire main gun into here and then heavy weapon into there. Because they're the same division, if they are, there still only counts as 1 instance of suppression. So I wouldn't give 2 different suppressions to the same, because the suppression goes to the division and not to the individual units. Now, individual units can still recover and try to bring that suppression down. At the time that we were playing, they were talking about it being 2 suppression would come off if you recovered. But then they were also talking about how raising it up to like the max courage value of the whole unit, so that it wasn't better to be panicked versus suppressed. But one of the key things that they were talking about with suppression is that if you did get too much suppression, you could still mitigate some of that by, when you activate your unit, when you activate your division, you can have like maybe your biggest shooter kind of go last and have the first couple of units recover, and now they've brought the suppression down enough that with your third unit, when they go, they'll get still both of their actions. And now the exact numbers and exactly the effects of that, I think we're still in flux, but so I'm not going to go too deep into suppression, but those are some of the important things about suppression, that if you're split firing into the same division, you're not going to double up on the suppression in that regard. Not sure exactly if you split fire with the suppressive weapon. I think that one was still in flux, but at least the regular suppression that you would get from rolling a hit when you're firing at somebody wouldn't be doubled up if you split fired into the same division. Certain effects will not work because you are zoomed out. So I'm going to talk about some things that I noticed in my list. I've also seen some questions about things that kind of modify how you build an army. There are certain effects like that. We know there's certain effects that they've already put out that aren't going to work. Things that give individual orders like HQ uplink and stuff are banned in this format. Other things aren't banned, they just don't work, or don't work, like anybody with entourage, for example. You're zoomed out so high level that it basically has no effect. Entourage is completely meaningless in this game, and so you can't do things. And I've seen some people talk about other keywords that, like, oh well, you can take this person with here, and you can take this. It doesn't affect your list building and stuff like that. From my understanding, all of those type of effects are not going to work in this effect. So you have to just build lists kind of as normal. You follow the division rules. There's no ways to kind of bypass the division army building rules. And all of those keywords, while they may be on a unit, they're not going to ban the whole unit. It's just that keyword is not going to have any effect. So Entourage was the example that came up in my games. It just did nothing. It's good to know. So you just ignore the whole keyword. Now, that might change in the future, but that was, again, the way it was played then. There's some interesting effects that I was curious how they were going to work, because I brought Dark Troopers. And Dark Troopers were fun, and some very interesting things came up as a result of Dark Troopers, and I'll talk about this. Now, also another thing to keep in mind with bringing vehicles, because divisions, I should say, have suppression, even though a vehicle can't be suppressed, a division of vehicles can be. So in this game, vehicles can actually be suppressed if the division gets enough suppression. Those are usually pretty high thresholds. I think there were 5 at the time that I was playing, so you would need 10 in order to, in order to panic an ATST unit or something like that. But it is possible, or an ATST division, I should say. I keep saying unit when I mean to say division, so I'll try to be more clear with that. But that is something else that came up, because I did have a unit of Dark Troopers, or a division of Dark Troopers. I had a division of ATSTs, and that was very interesting to me. So let's talk about the Dark Troopers. They have Unstoppable, which normally you would shuffle extra order tokens into the bag. You don't do that here because you're not worried about individual order tokens, but they didn't want to ban Dark Troopers completely. So there's a different way that Unstoppable works, and basically as soon as the division finishes activating, anybody with Unstoppable just activates again. So my Dark Trooper division, my Dark Trooper heavy division, basically was able to activate and then immediately activate again. This was really interesting, and there's certain things that really make Dark Troopers very interesting in this format. But and I don't know how many people brought them or have tested them or asked questions about how they would work. So I thought this was very cool, and it was definitely something that I get the idea that the developers planned for this, and they were kind of excited about it, because while Dark Troopers can be very powerful, the fact that now they can be suppressed gives vehicles as a whole a little bit of a weakness that they didn't have before. So there are certain things to kind of make up for that, and I saw a little bit of that in my gameplay, but it definitely leaned more towards being fun. But that was my thought. We're still on things that are different. Let's talk about command cards. You're not going to bring any command cards. You're not going to bring any battle cards or command cards, but you have custom stuff. So you have custom command cards. Now, there are 6 general command cards that you're going to get, and then you're also going to get 4 command cards for your factions. And then, on top of that, you're going to have command cards for any unique leaders you have. Now, at the time, they didn't have every unique leader, but I had one for Darth Vader. I didn't have one for Moff Gideon during this playtest. Doesn't mean that they won't have one for him eventually. I don't know how many leaders they're going to have command cards for when this retail product launches. But, like, for example, Han Solo had one. And they've tried to make these command cards very powerful to counter the fact that you don't get to bring your own command cards. Han Solo had something that let him kind of attack at everybody within range. He just got to go like Death Blossom and Darth Vader had one that was permanent. I believe it's currently the only one that has a permanent effect. And for him, it basically let him, at the start of his activation, he got to do a speed 1 move for free. And he also then got to give out tokens to his stormtroopers that were in his division, or I think it was corps or infantry that were in his division, based on how much suppression was on like nearby. Basically, he took the enemy's fear and then translated into tokens for allied infantry, which was a really cool thing. And of course, Vader getting a free speed 1 move at the start of every activation for the whole game is a very, very fun thing. Now, don't expect permanent cards for everybody else. At the time, Vader's the only permanent one. There may be more eventually, but that's a cool thing. All right. Now, the cards do have pips on them. They're kind of designed basically like normal, like how you would expect command cards to look, except they activate divisions rather than individuals. You're also going to play 2 command cards per turn, and then issue stuff to both of them. This does allow for some interesting combinations. The command cards were all designed, even the generic ones are designed to be very powerful. Some of them are very powerful offensively, and some of them are very reactionary powerful. Like there's ones that completely get rid of all suppression off of a unit, or off of a division. And situationally, that's going to be incredible. But you're playing 2 of them, and because they each have different pip values ranging from 4 to 1, you're actually then going to determine priority by the total combined number of pips that is played. So that was also really interesting because, you might play a 4 pip that is kind of lower on priority but has some really cool effects, and then maybe you play a 1 pip to go along with it, so your total number is 5, which isn't that bad if your opponent's also playing 2 command cards. It becomes kind of tricky to really try and go first. Now, also, you don't have access to all of the command cards every turn. You kind of shuffle them and you draw a couple, and so at the end of each round, cards go away. I think you can keep ones that you want to keep, but then you'll draw back up. You never get the same command card twice. There's a discard pile. So they have that whole card, the kind of the rotating card thing. They also told us that there was a new rule that we were working on that lets you, at the start of the game, you could pick 1 command card to start in your hand if it was for a hero that you had. So I had Darth Vader. I was able to start with Darth Vader's in my hand because they didn't want, because theoretically you might not go through every single card, right? Especially if you have some good ones that are situational and you hold on to them. You're not like cycling through. I think you'd only go through every card if you cycled through, you played your 2 and then discarded the rest and then drawed back up to your max hand size. I think the max hand size was 4. I think it was 4. I'm rusty on that. I might be incorrect. Don't hold me to that one. But you're not going to go through all of the command cards. So I was able to start with Vader's, but you can only pick one hero. So if I had two heroes that each had a custom command card, like if I had Vader and Veers, then I would only be able to pick one. So you can guarantee one at the start of the game. So the command cards is played very, very differently. There's custom primary objectives, and then there's custom secondaries. Now we had, I think, 7 different objectives on the board. It was a lot. There was a middle one, and then we had like staggered, 3 on each side. One kind of the back, one kind of towards me, and 2 other ones that were in the middle. And they kind of alternated, where one was a little close to the opponent, one was a little closer to me. That was one of the primaries. I didn't get to look at all of the different primaries, but they all have objectives. And one of the things that's different about primaries, and again, you're scoring 1 point. For the objectives, the primaries will say, like, if you score this, maybe the center one is worth an additional point, or they have different things like that. In the one that we played, the center objective, you were able to contest that instead of just range half, you were able to contest the center one at range 2. So it was a huge bubble to contest the center point. That is a kind of a cool thing. I liked that. And but it was different. Sometimes it might only be range 1. Maybe there'll be different ones where it's range 1 for the 2 on the corners or something like that. So also the different objectives that were on the outside had different dice symbols on them, like block or surge, and or crit, hit, and surge, I think, were the different symbols that were on there. And those would be referenced by other things, because we also had different secondaries. This is another way in the game changes a lot, because the secondaries, well, the primary comes out, and you decide, like, they chose one for us for this game, but there is, you would randomly determine that. There is also going to be secondaries, and they are going to be very, very different. They remind me a little bit of battle tactics in Age of Sigmar with the current way that they basically change, though, every turn. This is one I had definitely a lot of feedback on. So we would draw 3 secondary objectives, and there was a big stack of them, and they would each have 2 things that you had to read, and there were ways for you to score additional victory points. You have to do the top condition, and then there would be a bonus on the bottom. So it might say, score the surge, secure the surge points of whatever your current primary is. And then that you would score a victory point if you did that. And then perhaps you would say, you score a bonus point if you secured both surge points and the opponent isn't contesting them, or something like that. Or it may say score one, you're the critical point, and if you secure it with both a commander and an operative, you get a bonus 2 points, or something like that. So the secondary cards were some of them would deal with, eliminate a unit or suppress or cause a unit to panic. You score a bonus point. So you score a point if you make somebody panic. You score a bonus point if you made them panic as a result of a heavy vehicle firing. Things like that. So but the thing is, there's a lot of these, and you're getting new ones every turn. I think they also gave us the option you could keep one if you didn't score with it. But if you didn't score with it, it might not have been good. So you're probably more incentivized to discard it and get a whole new 3 every turn. It was either 3 or 4 that they gave us. But that is one that I definitely had some thoughts on, because there was a lot to read, and it felt a little... it felt very busy. Okay, so that the secondaries, whole new system of scoring, and the secondaries could add up to a lot, because I think you could score 3 of them, and if you had the bonus objectives on them too, you're scoring you could score 2 or 3 points per secondary. So in my first round, I think my opponent scored 10 victory points right away, whereas I only had 4. So the points definitely can kind of go crazy. Now, also, when it comes to feedback and takeaways for all of this, we have to kind of hold our judgment a little bit, because we all brought lists not knowing what we were going into. I think if you know the way secondaries are, I would have brought an operative. I didn't have any single operatives. So, I might have built more of an all-comers list that was more able to score, and the same goes for everybody. So we have to kind of look at it through that lens of, okay, we went in blind and then found out the rules afterwards. So that, it's important to keep that in mind. Let's move on. There's a couple of new things. I talked about suppression a little bit. That was also in my notes of things I wanted to talk about, and that it is different. It's definitely felt interesting. I think those are most of the new things that made this one stand out and feel different. Let's talk about what it felt like. The gameplay, it still felt like Star Wars Legion. I was still firing from a single unit at a time. I was still rolling about the same amount of dice I would typically roll when I attack. I'm still using the same movement tools and range tools. I'm still using a lot of the same materials. Still felt like Star Wars Legion. A lot of those core game rules were still the same. Gameplay itself was still focused on objectives. It's still about scoring points. It's still objective focused. Again, so that still makes it additionally feel like Legion. The command cards that they gave us were a lot of fun. They felt very powerful. I'll give you an example of one that I really liked. One of mine that activated a heavy division was able to give all of the units in that division steady for the rest of the round. That's a very cool thing. I chose to activate my Dark Trooper unit with this. Because of the fact that Dark Troopers had plotting and I couldn't do 2 moves with them. And they also, Dark Troopers lost access to Moff Gideon's card that lets them teleport. I feel like that's one of the main advantages to Dark Troopers, and they kind of go in crippled because they're stuck at speed 1, only 1 move per activation, and they have to deploy at the end of the board and have to just slog it. So this was a really good card for them that kind of helped overcome that weakness. And it wasn't a Dark Trooper specific card. It was a card that activated a heavy division. I loved this because of the way they worded Unstoppable. So I was able to then aim, move, shoot with a Dark Trooper unit, aim, move, shoot with another Dark Trooper. I had 2 in this division, for example. Very strong, and because of steady, right? Then, as soon as my division was done, all those Dark Troopers got to activate a second time. And in that case, I was also then able to aim, move, and shoot again. So I got 4 Dark Trooper moves and shots with aims at the same time. The only thing that wasn't great is one of the weapons had cycle, so the second shot wasn't as good, but alternatively, instead of aiming, I could have recovered, then moved, and then shot, right? So there's a lot of different ways to do it, and there's a lot of things that came to me afterwards. So it gave me a lot to think about. Alternatively, there was another command card, really, really fun, that would let you return a fallen model to a unit after the fact. And this is, this is a fun thing because it... I talked with a developer about this. I'm like, this would be really fun for Dark Troopers, but the problem... or actually, he even mentioned it to me. He said, yeah, have you seen that card? I'm like, I have seen that card, but the problem is that card doesn't apply to a heavy. It doesn't apply to a heavy unit. But then we thought to ourselves, and I was like, wait a second, I can take a heavy unit in an infantry division. So you can still take one. So there are some really powerful command cards that exist out there. They may get changed, they may get rebalanced, they may get adjusted a little bit before they hit retail. But the cool thing about these command cards is they felt very fun. They felt powerful and fun, and I think that's one of the things they're going for. It's a little bit like, it's like Legion with an exclamation point, right? If that makes sense. I think that's a good way to summarize all of a full-scale war. It's like a Legion in bold letters with an exclamation point. So you take your normal font, bold it up, add an exclamation point. That's kind of, I think, how the command cards made this feel. Some cards only worked if you had a certain type. I mentioned that like I didn't bring any operatives. I did see a lot of cards that weren't available to me because I didn't have an operative. Might have been a little bit too many in there that required specific unit types. But then again, I didn't see every card, so I may have just been unlucky and drawn a lot of cards that I just couldn't take advantage of. And that's okay, because again, if I were playing this again, I might make sure I included at least one of each type, in this particular, in my next build. So that's something that I would do. I'll say this, it does feel really good to activate a heavy division and have them all fire on the same target. Like having ATSTs just fire on Sabine over and over and over again. We wore her down, and when I killed Sabine with triple ATST fire, it took me a little bit, because she's tough to kill, and she had her own defensive things that gave her extra dodges, and I think she even healed a little bit. So yeah, like when you're trying to kill a highly defensive Beskar Mandalorian, it takes a while, but it feels really good to do it. Didn't feel super great, though. It doesn't feel great to activate a division that has like maybe only one unit left, or a single model left. So once a division starts getting whittled down through repeat fire, and again, your opponent's going to be able to do this to you as well. That can result in this is a wasted activation or a wasted division activation. Those units still have purpose, though, because they can still control objectives, and that's, there's still some gameplay value to them. It just doesn't feel as fun at that point, which is fine. So my last kind of big section here is things that my feedback and things that I would like to see changed. My first one is I feel like full-scale war needs less terrain. It needs more open area. The board we played on, and I have more shots of it. This is maybe not the best example, but there was a lot of scatter terrain, especially a lot like near like the deployment and everything like that. I would have liked a less crowded board. It was a little bit too much. So again, bringing vehicles is very fun to do here. You've got lots of big bases, especially for Republic. Like if you brought a couple of those, a couple of saber tanks or whatever, you're going to struggle to get them on the board, to get them all deployed. It's usually not such a big deal in a regular game where you have one or maybe two. But what if you bring 6? What if you bring 9? That's where it becomes a real big problem. And I don't think it's fun if you can't get all of your toys on the table, right? I had a hard time getting my triple ATSTs, finding a spot for them to go. It was, and it meant that I couldn't put them on the board where I wanted to put them, and I had to put them in a whole different section of the board. I would have felt more comfortable with less terrain. I understand that some units live and die by cover. And I feel like maybe command cards or even objectives you could change some objectives to where they actually exude a cover 2 bubble around them, like their force field kind of objectives and stuff like that. I feel like there's other ways to add cover to the game with using less terrain to facilitate twice as many units on the battlefield, especially bigger units. So that's one thing that I would do differently. And in your own games also, you control how much terrain you have. But if the recommended setup is the same, then if this does make it to tournaments, we're probably going to see the same thing. So before this gets to the level where there's a tournament next year at Adepticon, or if they're going to do that, which would be fun, having less terrain would be an important thing. Also, it's difficult to travel with 2,000-point army. That had to be my entire carry-on. It was not the most easy thing. I don't know if I'd always want to like travel for across the country tournaments with basically 2 lists worth of stuff. Another thing I'd like to see change, I wouldn't mind if there were less objectives. One of the things that I was hoping is that this mode would have focused a little bit more on trying to blow each other up and focus more on shooting and less on movement. And because there were so many objectives on the board, it still became very much about babysitting objectives, and I'm not as crazy about that part of the game. That's just my own personal opinion. You're free to feel differently. I know objectives are important in games. I just thought that there were a little bit too many. I think 7 was a bit much. I think like 3 would have been really good for this game mode, but that's some of my feedback. Especially when like you have like a lot of objectives. You can see in this photo there were objectives in the back corners. You kind of have to babysit those. And divisions have a coherency limit, so you can't just kind of park one guy on that objective. You have to keep his whole division fairly close to it. Now, division coherency is such that you can get two. One division can potentially hit two objectives, but they're still like, then they're kind of staying out of the action. They can't really dive in, especially if you have melee focused units. If you're going to try to hunt people down, you really need to have less objectives for that. And that's some of my thoughts. I would like to see less. Like faster gameplay overall, and this kind of goes into the secondaries. The secondary cards that came out, and these were this is a big driving force. I think there's a lot of different ways they could approach making this faster, because to me, the secondary cards that came out every turn, we had new cards, new ways to score every turn. They were complicated, but not too complicated, but they were sufficiently complicated that you had to sit down and read them. And there were a lot of them, so I think even after you've played a couple of games, I don't think you'll have them all committed to memory right away. I think you'll have like the general idea, but because each of them has multiple scoring scenarios, like you have this is what you need to do to score. These are the restrictions on it. And also here's the bonus if you've done this with this unit, or if you've made sure that you killed an enemy in the process or whatever, then you can score even more points. So each one of them is somewhat complicated. You're getting multiple every turn. And so as soon as you figure it out, what you have to do, then those cards go away and you get totally new ones. So I felt like that slowed the game down a lot because of the fact that you've never seen these before. They're constantly changing. They might, you might have to move, your heavy division all the way over to this side of the board to try to score this one, but then the card goes away, and then, the next one I had to have them all the way on the other side of the board. So there's a little bit of you're constantly shifting directions with these cards constantly coming out. You do have the option to save them, but if you save them, that means you didn't score it. So you want to be scoring them as fast as you can and getting them gone and getting new ones. So that slowed the game down a lot. I wouldn't mind if there were less, like maybe you just get one new one a turn, or if you just get them at the beginning of the game and these are just the ones that you score with and you can continue to score with them over and over again. This way you'd have some objectives at the beginning of the game, these secondary objectives, and you just have to kind of commit to them pre-game, and you're like, this is what I'm going to have to try and do to score, and that's going to be my focus. And then, or focus on the primary, or just try to table your opponent, or what have you. But yeah, that's the big thing. Is I think the secondaries, with their level of complexity and them constantly shifting, slowed the game down a little bit. We only got to turn 3 in my game, but I do understand that most people were able to finish their games in the 3-hour timeline. Most of the games went about 3 hours. So I might have just been an outlier. I might just read slow, or I did too much analysis paralysis there. That might have been the case. But it definitely went a little slower for me. Trying to figure out, oh man, I can't score with this one because I need an operative to get the bonus. So it's not really worth it for me to really try to score this one. All right, so I'm going to try and do this. I'm going to try, like I had one that was all about suppression. I needed to try to suppress somebody. And I didn't quite get there. And then it was like, well, next turn, do I want to just get new cards? And then new cards come out, and I decided I didn't want to keep that one. And then new cards came out, and then it was a totally different strategy. So shifting my entire gameplay strategy at the start of every round was not my favorite part of this. So again, it was still fun. The command cards, I think, were the best part, and the secondary objectives were my least favorite part. And again, those things are easy to fix. There's a lot without even changing the secondaries. If they stayed the same the whole game, I thought that would have been great. Or maybe some kind of combination where one stays the same the whole game, and you can score that one repeatedly, and the other ones, cycle through or something like that. I feel like there's a lot of different directions they could do. I did even talk to, and that was my feedback for AMG after the playtest. They talked to me a little bit later in the con too, said, hey, they were already taking some of that feedback into case, and they're talking about shrinking the number. I think at the time we drew like 4 secondaries, and they said we're going to bring it down to like 2 or 3 or something like that, so there's less. And it was cool to see like some of that feedback get like written down and kind of applied right away. So I'm really interested to see what like the next version of Full Scale War comes out to be like. It was pretty fun. Those are my overall notes. I will say another thing. I think there was going to be a lot of lessons learned, because I think this was the first time that they had done sort of a public open play test like this, where with materials that weren't finalized and hadn't been like through LFL approvals process, because again, they're still trying to figure it out. But the interesting thing was like, hey, please don't film or photograph. And the problem is it was in an open area, and there was even a time where, other content creators are walking by filming the games, and they're being asked, hey, please don't film. And there was a point where somebody said, I don't think you have the right to tell me that you can't film, that I can't film here. We're at Adepticon and on the exhibitor hall, and it did bring up an interesting point. I'm like, they have a point, and the other part is, maybe next time have a private area, like maybe a kind of a roped off area, or if there's a way they could do it in a private room, you'd also be able to hear each other a little bit better, but that would if they're trying to do things like this where there is a degree of requested privacy, then that would definitely be a way to do that better in the future. But again, this was the first time we did something like that, so there's going to be a lot of lessons learned for it. Hopefully I got to a lot of your guys' questions. Let me know some more that you have down in the comments section. If there's something that I forgot to cover, or if there's something that comes up to me later, I'll try to do my best to answer it. You can also jump in our Discord and ask questions there and keep the discussion going. That's about it for my topics of Full Scale War. I do want to talk a little bit about our new sponsors. As you know, we have a discount code for Battle Foam, which is Crabbok VIP. That's going to save you 15% over at the Battle Foam store. We also have a new sponsor, Game Toppers. If you watched any of the Star Wars Legion games at Adepticon, the streamed games, the main table was on a Game Topper. These are amazing table toppers that can convert a regular table into a deluxe game table. They also have leg kits, and they have all sorts of accessories. So we have a code Crabbok15. If you go to shop.gametoppersllc.com, we're gonna have a link in the description below. It's gonna save you 15% off of accessories and playmats over at Game Toppers. Now, this doesn't save off the toppers themselves. Those are already priced very, very competitively, straight to sell. You're already going to get a great deal on those. But if you want to add mats and extra accessories and all of that stuff, use code Crabbok15. We have a link in the description below. The playmats are absolutely gorgeous, and they also have, we're going to be looking at some here pretty soon. But they have like the stitched edging. They're really, really pretty. You're going to love them. Definitely check them out. They have some fantastic designs as well. Really, really great designs. So, yeah, head over to Game Toppers and check them out. Use code Crabbok15. It just doesn't work on the toppers or anything that's already on clearance. But for all of your mats and accessory needs, check them out. Very cool stuff. And that's going to do it for the video. The big thanks to my patrons. You guys are absolutely amazing and can continue to make this channel possible. Big thanks to Will, who gave our demo for Full Scale War. I know I said Will. There's a lot of Wills at AMG. Will, you know who you are. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. It was a great demo, and thank you so much for that. I will talk to you guys later. May the Force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes. So say we all, and always wash your socks.